Hi, this is Nicole Dyer, and in this episode of the Research Like a Pro question and answer series, we had a great question submitted about how to find GPS locations of tombstones or property. So in this video, I'm going to talk about using metadata tagged in your smartphones when you take a picture of a tombstone and how you can use that to find the GPS coordinates and then put those into Find a Grave. Also, I'll talk about billion graves and finding locations of property from deeds and other records, and then saving that to Google My Maps and other resources that can allow you to find the exact location again. The first question is, what program do you use to locate GPS locations of tombstones or property locations? So thinking about GPS coordinates, at first I thought of Billion Graves. Billion Graves is a site similar to Find a Grave, but it really focuses on providing GPS data for the headstones to eliminate that problem of going to the cemetery, knowing your ancestors buried somewhere, but not knowing which part of the cemetery and having to walk all around before you can find it. Well, Billion Graves has an app, and when you take a picture of a headstone and upload it to Billion Graves, it automatically saves the coordinates of the GPS of where that's located. Now, something you may not know is that most smartphone cameras also incorporate GPS. So anytime you take a photo, if you have enabled this feature to save the GPS coordinates of where the photo was taken, then it will save the location of the photo in the metadata of the photo. So this is really useful because if you're out visiting cemeteries and you take a picture of your ancestor's grave, then you've also saved the GPS coordinates in the metadata of the photo. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And this is exactly what Billion Graves does with their app. So if you go to Billion Graves and you find your ancestor's grave there, then you can easily find the grave at the cemetery. Find a Grave also has been trying to incorporate GPS coordinates. And so you'll sometimes see that on the location of the grave. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But the cemetery map view will show you how much of that cemetery has GPS coordinates. So it will say 13% of this cemetery has GPS coordinates. And then to find the coordinates or the location of a headstone, then sometimes you can use a combination of documentary records like death records that state where the burial occurred and what cemetery, and then using Google Maps to find the cemetery that's listed in the death record. That could at least give you the coordinates of where the cemetery is. And Google Maps is a tool that I use all the time to find locations of places. So here's an example of the headstone of my fourth great grandfather, James B. Harris, in Love County, Oklahoma, in the Bernieville Cemetery. I drove to Bernieville and found this cemetery and walked all around and looked for his headstone. And then when I found it, I took a picture and I uploaded it to my Google Photos account. And when I got home, I looked at it on my computer, and my Google Photos has this little I button right here for information. Clicking on that opens the sidebar for the information, and it shows me the date that I took that. It showed me the phone that I used to take that, or the device I used to take that picture. It has the name of the photo and the resolution and size. It shows that it was uploaded from my Android device, so that's my smartphone. It shows that it was backed up in the original quality, which that's because I have I purchased extra storage from Google to save all of my photos in original quality so that they're backed up in high quality. It shows the location right here. And then it shows the exact location on the map. And this isn't just in general at the Bernieville Cemetery, it's the exact location within the cemetery where I actually stood and took the picture. So if you click on this, it opens into a new tab, and it shows the exact coordinates where the photo was taken. And so here is the location where I took the photo within the Bernieville Cemetery. And I do remember driving up on this road, turning left here and parking my car right here. And then I walked all around over here, and then I ended up right here. And this is where I found the headstone and took the picture. So now I have these exact coordinates of exactly where James B. Harris's tombstone is. So I can use that later, and you can actually even add that to Find a Grave. So I'll show you that in a minute. But while we're talking about Google Maps, let's talk about the GPS coordinates here. You can see they're listed here in two different formats. You can see the 33 degrees, 54, and all of this stuff, which I'm not really familiar with how to say it, but I recognize it as GPS coordinates. Then they have the other format below that has the 33.90 and all the decimal points, and then the negative 97. So that would be the latitude and the longitude. So in Google Maps, you can actually click on the map to drop a pin anywhere on the map, and it will show you these coordinates. So if I just clicked over here, then it would change the coordinates to be this location. So you can also search by coordinates. So if you have GPS coordinates from something else and you paste them into Google Maps, it will then show you where those coordinates are. In Google Maps, you can even save locations to your account in your saved places. So if I wanted to save this place, I can click add a label or click save, or I can share that with somebody. So often I will save a place and then it's saved to my Google account and I can find it in my Google Maps. And you can see I'm logged into my Google Maps by seeing my account, my Google account picture here. So if you're logged in like I am and you have this add a label or save button, then you know that it's going to be saved to your personal Google account. Okay, so as I mentioned, Find a Grave also has GPS. People can add that. The easiest way to do it is by taking a picture with GPS coordinates enabled and then uploading that picture to the memorial. You can see for this cemetery near my home in Green Valley, Arizona, that there are 13% of the headstones with GPS. Then when you go to the individual graves, you can see for this example here that this one does have the GPS coordinates. The way that you see it though is kind of tricky. It doesn't say GPS coordinates, it says show map. And so you have to click on this show map and then it will give you the coordinates. So then I can take these coordinates and paste them into a map, like Google Photos. Then I decided to go ahead and add the coordinates for James B. Harris too as memorial. So it has a section if you want to suggest an edit. I'm not the owner of this memorial, so I had to suggest an edit. And then you can put in the latitude and the longitude. So I just went back to here and I copied and pasted, let's see right here, copied and pasted this one right here with the 33.9 and then the negative 97. I copied and pasted all of those numbers and into the latitude and then into the longitude. And then I saved that. And a few days later, the owner of the memorial accepted the changes. So now when I look at his Find a Grave, it's going to show like this, a show map with the latitude and longitude. All right, so the second part of the question was how do you find locations of property and save those and get the GPS coordinates? So this is a little bit harder sometimes because we have to first figure out the exact location of their property from historical records, unless we already know it. And so in some cases, you may already know it. Like in the Dyer reunion, we were in Alamosa and Sanford, Colorado, and we were able to drive exactly to the location because somebody in the family just remembered where the family farm was 100 years ago. And so, and there was still like an old log cabin that was dilapidated that was still there. And there was a Dyer family who were distant cousins living next door. So we were able to find the family farm and we actually saved the location in our GPS back in the day when we had like GPS separate outside of our phones and later saved that to our Google Maps so that we could always remember the location of the Dyer farm in Alamosa, Colorado. Well, another way to find it if your family doesn't remember is by looking in deeds. And the deeds usually have a property description, and sometimes it's vague, and sometimes you can use it to find the exact location. But if it's too vague, you might struggle unless you're able to find like the name of the creek that it was on or some other feature that was mentioned. So often there will be some kind of feature. And this is, I'm thinking of state land states because that's what I do a lot, like Tennessee, Virginia. But if you have a federal land state, you can always find that from, it will list like the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter, and you can find that really easily. So depending on what type of land state it is or wherever it is in the world, depending on what records are available and historical information, you can usually locate it. And then once you've located it on a map, then you can drop a pin in Google Maps and save that. And then you have the GPS coordinates and you can go to that exact place. Or like if you already are at the location, if you take a photo of it with your smartphone, then the GPS coordinates will be saved as long as you remember what that photo is of. So I did take some pictures when I was in Love County, Oklahoma, of the land where my ancestors lived and where they owned land, but maybe didn't live there. And then I saved it in the metadata. This is the land that John C. Harris owned in 1901, so that I could remember why I took that picture there. Sometimes a gazetteer can be really helpful in locating the exact location of the property as well, because you can use it to find names that are obsolete now, like creek names and little towns and villages that don't exist on Google Maps or whatever map you're using anymore. So those gazetteers can be so helpful. And sometimes they'll be in the public domain and you can just find them on Google Books or HathiTrust or Internet Archive. Other times you need to go to the Family Search Library or find like a historical society or a state library and archives that will have some gazetteers like that you can look up. I've been able to find a lot of them online though, so hopefully you can too. And Family Search Books is a great resource for this because they have a lot of material that is useful for genealogists that's in the public domain. So kind of a combination of all of these different things to find the location and then coordinating that with Google Maps, dropping a pin, and then finding those coordinates. So here's an example of when I was in Oklahoma. I went to the location of the property of John C. Harris within the town of Marietta, Oklahoma, and I drove over to this address where I had found that he lived, and I actually used a really big map on the wall of the Love County courthouse that had the town lots of Marietta mapped out. And then I used that in conjunction with a deed that said which town lot he was in and what street it was on. So kind of putting those two things together, I was able to get like the address and see where it was. And then I drove over there and took a picture and I saved the location here. So you can see I put a heart there and that means I saved it. Another thing that I've used in the past is Google My Maps, and this is where you can create a custom specific map just for your project. And all kinds of people use this just for any kind of project they have that might need a map. And you can drop pins, which is the same as adding markers, and label the markers. You can draw points, lines, and polygons. You can even import a spreadsheet of dates and places as long as one of the columns is a location, whether it's GPS coordinates or a town or some kind of crossroads that is recognizable in Google Maps. And then it can draw a migration route for you. You can read more about this at the following URL. This is support.google.com/mymaps. And then you can just look this up on Google or type in this link. But this is another resource to help you really map out the exact locations of where your ancestors were. And a lot of the information in Google Maps can help you to really understand where people lived. And in this example, you can see I even imported a special map that showed the county boundary lines. This was actually really hard to do. I wish this were easier. But I found for South Carolina that there was a special map file that you can import, and it showed the county boundaries for me. So here's a question. How do you input Find a Grave GPS coordinates to Google Maps to find the location? So let's go back to that. So if you have these GPS coordinates from Find a Grave, you can just copy and paste this information, highlight it, copy it, and then paste it into Google Maps, like right here in the search bar, and then it should show you the location.